Ready to go whenever you are.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 22nd of January. We will begin, as usual, by giving you notification that this is being broadcast live on our YouTube channel, so you should consider anything said here to have been published. We will first take apologies for absence, and I've received apologies from councillors Nagpal and Wall. I don't believe there are any other apologies for absence. So item number 2, urgent matters. Yesterday evening at Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I'm pleased to say that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee upheld the Cabinet's decision on Warren Farm. It then went on to make just two actually informal and non-statutory recommendations. On that basis, I thought we would take the opportunity to respond to them this evening, particularly given both recommendations are entirely in line with the briefings and the Cabinet report, and I think we discussed also at length at OSC itself. So we'll do that under urgent matters. Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely right. Last night we had the decision of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to endorse our plans for Warren Farm, and we're now able to move on with those plans. The committee did, as you say, make 2 informal recommendations, which are fully in line with our direction of travel. So I just wanted to take the opportunity tonight to make sure that we had responded to those. The first recommendation was around ensuring that we undertake an ecological and habitat survey of the site as part of the feasibility study. And I did outline actually in both in the Cabinet report and the subsequent briefing to and discussion at Overview and Scrutiny Committee that an ecological survey will be required as part of any future planning application for material changes to the existing use at Warren Farm Sports Ground. And importantly, an ecological survey will determine both the potential risks to ecological impact as well as any proposed mitigations. An ecological survey would be a material consideration for a planning authority in determining any changes to the existing configuration and the use classes at the sports ground. The feasibility study and the soft market testing are anticipated to bring greater clarity to the extent of any proposed development of community sports facilities at Warren Farm Sports Ground. So happy to be able to, as I say, confirm that that is part of our direction of travel in terms of the next steps with the site. The other informal recommendation was that the Cabinet is recommended to engage with Imperial College in order to reconsider whether the proposed sports facilities can be located on their land rather than on Warren Farm site. And I did again clarify at the meeting last night that we remain in ongoing discussions with Imperial College over proposals for rewilding across the expanded site. All options will be considered in the context of each party's requirements and rights over their respective freeholdings within the feasibility study. But those discussions continue with Imperial and will continue.
Thank you very much. There are matters to be considered in private on items 11, 14 and 15. They are indicated on the gold paper. And as always, if people could indicate before going on to gold paper, because in those circumstances, we would need to end the live broadcast and clear the gallery. So I'd implore both Cabinet and any speakers on those items to please, if you can, refrain from doing that so that we can keep these proceedings public. Any declarations of interest? I don't believe there are any, so I direct Cabinet to the minutes of the last meeting and ask if there are any corrections. And if not, I will ask that they are agreed.
Agreed.
They are agreed. Thank you. No appointments to subcommittees and outside bodies. Given the degree of interest in item number 13, replacement of Gurnell Leisure Centre, I propose to take that agenda item first. What we will do, therefore, given we have a number of people who've requested to speak on the agenda item, is first have the report introduced by Councillor Manro, And given the considerable interest, Councillor Manro is going to take us through the report's justifications and the recommendations that the Cabinet are being asked to agree. Following Councillor Manro's presentation, we will hear from Sir Sherrod Cowper-Coles, who is the chair of the Gurnell Community Sounding Board. We will then hear from David Hibbert, who is the chair of trustees of the Ealing Swimming Club, and then Kay Garmison of the Gurnell Leisure Centre Sounding Board and Ealing Matters. We'll then take questions from the leader of the opposition and the leader of the second party, and then go to discussion by Cabinet. So hopefully that all makes sense. And I therefore move to Councillor Manro to introduce the report.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So can we put up the slides, please?
That's good. You keep on going. That's good. For the purpose of the recording, we had a slight technical hiccup, but we will be with you momentarily. Here we go. So if you put that into full screen mode.
Okay, can we move to slide 1, please?
1 second. Yeah, there we go. Brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Manro.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm looking forward to providing an update and outlining our plans for the future of Gurnell Leisure Centre. The plans we're discussing today represent the best way to deliver the state-of-the-art leisure facilities that our residents deserve without resorting to increases in council tax or irresponsible council borrowing. They also represent the beginning of our new way of working with our residents and community groups in a more open, transparent, and inclusive way. We know that not everyone is going to agree, but we are all going to need to make some compromises if we are going to get the doors of a new Gurnell open soon. I want to emphasize upfront that we remain at an early stage and no final decisions have been made about the design of the scheme, so we will continue to work with our local residents and our community sounding board on the detail of the proposals as we commission further detailed work to inform the planning submission. Can we move? And as you can see from the screen, that's the existing site. Can we move to the next one, please? And there we have another picture of where the site is and in the context. So we'll start. Can we go to slide 3, please?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's 3. Okay. Oh, sorry, apologies. I've got one in front of me as well. We'll start off with some context. On the slides, you can see the existing site showing the current built footprint of the leisure centre. The current built footprint includes the current leisure centre, the car park to the southeast of the site, as well as the BMX track and the play park. And of course, people may not realize this, but the site was previously a Victorian sewage works and a council rubbish tip many years ago. Slide 4, yeah. You can see here some images from the leisure centre's interior. The current leisure centre isn't currently safe for use or fit for purpose. All the parties involved agree on this and on the importance of re-providing a high quality leisure centre on this site. Next slide, please. I'm sure many of you remember the previous EcoWorld scheme, which, while I was chair of the planning committee, was rejected. 3 members of this cabinet were on the planning committee when we made that decision. So that was me, Councillor Geoff Blacker, and Councillor Steve Donnelly, who was my vice chair of planning committee. When we made that decision, it was primarily to protect the openness of the metropolitan open land and because we were not happy with the designs of the proposed residential development. The scheme proposed by EcoWorld did re-provide the leisure centre, but also included around 6 blocks containing 600 homes with heights varying from 12 to 17 stories. Next slide, please. We have undertaken extensive public consultation in this project, both via a resident survey and the community sounding board. A summary of the results of the resident survey is attached to the cabinet report. In their responses to the survey, many local residents expressed their disappointment that the leisure centre was forced to close and were keen for a new leisure centre to be provided. 1,790 residents used Gurnall for swimming and water activities, but the use of the gym and fitness classes was also prevalent, with 551 respondents listing that activity. This was reflected in a water and fitness facilities being the most desired feature of any future leisure centre. Therefore, we are committed to delivering the high quality facilities for the borough, which include our commitment to the 50-metre Olympic-sized swimming pool. In terms of how local residents thought the centre should be funded, a third supported a mixed-use development in order to pay for the site. It's also key to note that less than 1 in 5, 19% of respondents would have accepted a rise in council tax in order to provide funds for the project. The Gurnall Community Sounding Board was established to gather community input on the project and has met on 5 occasions since May of 2022. The Community Sounding Board last met on Monday to discuss this report. Prior to that, the last meeting was in September 2022. The board is attended by ward councillors as well as representatives from various community and leisure groups in order to gather a range of views for those who have a direct stake in the project. Members of the Community Sounding Board include the Ealing Swimming Club, Stop the Towers, Save Gurnall, and many others that are on the screen. I want to be absolutely clear that while some time elapsed between the September meeting and the publication of this report, nothing we're discussing today is new. That time was used by officers to develop this report. All of the content was covered in detailed discussions by the Community Sounding Board, which the chair will, I'm sure, outline in more detail when he speaks. We're pleased that there are several people from organizations represented on the Sounding Board here to speak this evening. The chair of the Sounding Board, Sharon Coles, will speak later on, but I wanted to outline there are 2 key areas of consensus within the board. These are that there continues to be a need for a leisure centre and Gurnall should be replaced as soon as possible. And that the most important point is that the existing leisure centre cannot be renovated or refurbished. Areas of disagreement include a residential development construction on the site, ecological MOL concerns of any development, whether the leisure centre should be a like for like. We know that compromise is required and not everyone will always agree. I really wanted to thank those who have participated in the Community Sounding Board for their time, expertise, and energy, and to highlight the influence they have had on the project. We are committed to continuing our work with the various local stakeholders on the Community Sounding Board to ensure that the views of the community are taken into account throughout. Next, slide 9. A detailed feasibility study has been prepared, which includes a reuse appraisal proposal for a new leisure centre and a consideration of the site master plan. Both these and a further feasibility report are available as an appendix to the cabinet report. Slide 10. On this slide, you can see a brief history of the project. After the refusal of the EcoWorld scheme, we conducted a detailed resident survey to inform discussions about the future of the site, starting with the initial brief and a site analysis with the inaugural community sounding board meeting in May of last year and a vision workshop in the same month. Options testing involved the second community sounding board meeting. Then we moved to a refinement of the brief with 2 more sounding board meetings in July and September of 2022. The existing building poses significant technical barriers to an energy efficient, net zero aligned retrofit. Currently, the building is powered by gas and produces 1,385 tons of CO2 per annum. We're not alone in facing challenges in providing leisure facilities in buildings which are no longer fit for purpose. Over 60 leisure centres have closed in the last 3 years due to excessive running costs, with Swim England predicting that more than 100 pools are under the threat of closure in the next 6 months. This is part of the reason why we are pushing for a scheme that would deliver an energy efficient leisure centre to try and future-proof this provision. Any retrofit of the current building would only bring emissions down to 930 tons of CO2 per year, which would not bring the building into compliance with the guidelines set out in the London Plan. Whilst we would ordinarily take a retrofit first approach, in this instance, cabinet approval is being sought to pursue options to demolish and replace the leisure centre, because the existing building cannot be refurbished, as doing so would be prohibitively expensive and would not offer enough environmental or social benefit to justify the cost. And the Community Sounding Board agrees on this key point. Slide 12, please. It's really important to note that the leisure centre has to be able to pay for itself. We've tested 5 options ranging from 28 million up to 54.4 million in estimated cost. Currently on the slide is what a retrofit of the current facility would offer. This option would not only provide substandard facilities for our community, would bring in significantly less revenue than any of the other tested options. You can go to the next slide. We can now see this is the option for a top of the range, high cost brand new leisure centre. Whilst this option would deliver high quality facilities for residents, we don't believe it would offer those at value for money for taxpayers in the borough. On this slide, you can see that we recommended the optimised one brief. We believe this scheme offers the state-of-the-art leisure facilities that residents of Ealing deserve and the most positive value for money. We estimate that this proposal option would provide a leisure centre, which would offer the borough the valuable leisure facilities that its community needs, and it would last for at least the next 40 years. Next slide, please. The preferred scheme has been costed at a total of 40 million for the building and 5 million for the landscaping and other associated works, including the BMX track. There are various funding options that have been identified, including Section 106 funding, external grants, future leisure income. However, these alone won't be enough to pay for the scheme, and therefore options for enabling development remain in consideration as part of the proposed project. Given the constraints of the site, it won't be possible for any enabling development to pay the entire cost of providing the leisure centre. So an aspect of the funding for the leisure centre will be council borrowing. As previously mentioned, we have heard the views of our community through the consultation, and 1/3 cited enabling development as their preferred funding route, followed by council borrowing. On the diagrams shown, we can see 2 of the master plan options that were up for consideration. On the left, we can see approach 1, which involves the replacement leisure centre remaining in place where it is now, with enabling residential developments to the east. On the right, we can see the site approach 3, which would have involved the relocation of the leisure centre to the northwest corner of the plot, with enabling development being placed along the Ruislip Road east. There was an option 2, however. This was quickly ruled out as it encroached too far onto the green space towards the back of the plot. And we were committed to continuing to provide valuable green spaces in the borough. This rejected approach can be viewed in full in a feasibility study, which is attached to the Cabinet report. We anticipate that the enabling residential development on the site will comprise of between 200 and 300 homes, approximately half what was initially proposed by EcoWorld. We also anticipate that the building heights would be significantly more reserved than the previous EcoWood scheme, with buildings of a maximum of 10 stories. As we saw previously, the previous EcoWorld scheme was not suitable for the site, and the council has taken that on board, which we conceive this more appropriate level of on-site development. We also commissioned a further feasibility study. We haven't yet looked into the detailed viability of each, and it's therefore likely that the final scheme will exist somewhere in between the two options. We are committed to delivering this scheme in line with our key design principles of openness, aiming for passive home standards, appropriate scale, and a focus on creating a sense of community. We want to maintain the openness of MOL land on the site, ensuring that the project is in keeping with our climate goals, ensuring that the enabling development is limited in its scale, and ensuring that Gurnall can once again become a hub for the community to use for sport and leisure activities. The current timeline has us submitting planning by the end of this calendar year. We would then work towards a start on site in the summer of 24, with the aim of the leisure centre being completed in the autumn of 2026. The enabling housing development is currently earmarked for completion in early 2028. I want to reiterate that we are committed to continuing our work with the Community Sounding Board to ensure that the views of the community are taken into account throughout. Thank you for your time. I've been pleased to bring these recommendations to Cabinet, which represent our best chance of delivering progress on this important scheme and bringing a new state-of-the-art leisure facility back into use in Ealing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Manro. I'm now going to invite the speakers who've requested to speak to join us at the front. The first will be Sir Sherrod Cowper-Coles, who has been the independent chair of the Gurnall Community Sounding Board. Sir Sherrod, as you get settled, as I've indicated to all speakers, we are going to aim to do 3 minutes each. But please do go ahead, Sir Sherrod, when you're ready.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Mason. Thank you, Councillor Manro, for that excellent report. It's been my privilege and also occasionally my pleasure to chair this sounding board. We've had 6 meetings, all of them very lively, all of them supported by an excellent team of officers from the council with a full set of paperwork and by a very impressive range of professional advisors. And I want to pay tribute to the way in which the council has taken the trouble to consult, has taken the trouble to inform, and has taken the trouble to ensure that everyone is properly briefed and to listen. Councillor Manro has covered the ground extremely well in his report. I said at the beginning of these sounding board meetings, they weren't about pleasing all of the people all of the time. They were about making sure that the democratically elected representatives of the people of this borough had a sense of local opinion in making the difficult choices, particularly about housing provision, in order to pay for the development and about the use of metropolitan open land. So I'm afraid, the reality is you won't please all of the people all of the time. As my report says, as the report from Save Gurnell suggests, you will have to make choices in the wider interest of the borough and of the people, indeed, of West London, from which the whole of Ealing and West London will in the end benefit. So the issues are set out there. It's all to do with striking a balance democratically, and also remembering that the reality is with a sounding board that many of the members tend to be the more committed members of the community, not necessarily representative of the wider shades of opinion picked up in the council's survey. So I stand ready to help in any way. I've learnt a very great deal. I've come away more convinced than ever that we need to work together to get this project over the line. It's a tragedy that the site has been standing empty since the outbreak of COVID, and there's now a clear timetable for moving forward. Thank you very much, Councillor Mason, for inviting me to serve in this capacity, and I stand ready to help in any way to answer questions. But the issues are clearly set out in my report and were set out orally very clearly by Councillor Manro.
So Sharon, thank you so much. Be on hand, because it may well be that there are questions that we might wish to ask you. What I'd like to do now is invite David Hibbert, the Chair of Trustees of the Ealing Swimming Club, who will also speak for a short period of time. So David's just making his way forward. Thank you so much. We'll let you get settled before we get going.
Okay.
Please do go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for letting us come in and speak to you. Ealing Swimming Club, in our opinion, agrees with the terms of a new pool, and the best option for the Gurnell Village Pension is that we believe is to replace it. We are looking forward, and we will work with the sounding board team and yourselves to move forward on the decision in the future. We're looking forward to the state of our new swimming pool and leisure centre with a 50-metre pool to support the children and the people of the borough, because over the last 2 years, with the COVID pandemic and etc., the children need to have a new pool to help them to learn to swim, because we are suffering dreadfully from drownings last year or so, because the children haven't been learning to swim, and adults. We want to ensure that the leisure centre that you produce will support all the existing facilities, to support from people from Learn to Swim all the way through to Olympians and Masters and the general public, for their ability to maintain their fitness. We look forward to seeing that the building is going to be extremely environmental, so that and it's future-proofed, as you pointed out. And we would think it would be a landmark to get this leisure centre up and running as soon as possible. And it would mark the London Borough as a sport and fitness focused community.
Carry on notes. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulty, but please do continue.
That's fine. Yeah, you mentioned about the number of closure of pools that are going on. The club itself has suffered quite dramatically with the closure of the Gurnell pool, and our parents and children have had to be moved to different pools, causing extra transportation costs to the parents themselves and other members of the public, having to go to Acton or Northolt or Tormers Wells. So we really need the new leisure centre should be put in place as soon as possible. because we think it's a central point for the borough that the Gurnall Pool should be replaced as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just give me 1 second whilst we just ascertain what the technical difficulty is. So we've figured out that the video is frozen for people who are watching along, but they can hear our dulcet tones in all of their glorious, probably not Technicolor, it's probably something different, isn't it? They're Dolby surround sound. Actually, Councillor Ball can probably tell us a little bit about that later, can't he? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. What we're going to do now is we're going to turn to the requests for questions that we have had from firstly, Councillor Julian Gallant.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got.
Yes, so we did have a request to speak from Kay Garmison. I don't believe that she's present, so we moved on to the questions from opposition members.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is actually a question for Sir Sherard, if I may, and about the sounding board, which of course is a good thing, and the engagement is good. But they have published in an alternative agenda today a paragraph which alarmed me a little bit, which said, although we have been engaged in the Gurnell proposals, there is a strong feeling that we are being driven to an outcome rather than being in the driving seat ourselves. While we accept the need to replace the leisure centre, we do not want to end up in the same situation as the previous scheme, i.e. significant sums of tax.
I think we've got the we've got the question, yeah.
Do you want my next question? I've got one more question, and this is to Councillor Manro. This is about provision of parking, which is addressed in the report. But it's the parking appears to be a scheme which it allows residents to use it at night and leisure centre users to use it during the day. Is that not rather hopeful, and should that not be addressed more carefully at this early stage?
So one of the things that I was going to say, but regrettably forgot to say when I was told that Kay Garmison is not attending today, is to draw Cabinet and to draw the public to the appendices in the report. In twofold. Number one, that I'm sure members will note that the position statement by a number of members of the sounding board was included in the original paperwork that was submitted to Cabinet. And when I became aware that the subsequent document that was circulated to members that included the position statement that had already been included in the paperwork was not published with the report, I did instruct officers to publish that document. So, that is about us being an open, transparent and inclusive council. We're not in the business of wanting to shy away from difficult decisions, far from it. They're legitimate points that have been put that we need to answer, and hopefully the response from Councillor Manro has hopefully satisfied some of that. But I wanted to put that on record now ahead of inviting Sir Sherard. Do you want to address Councillor Gallant's question in respect of the discussions at the sounding board?
Thank you, Councillor Gallant, for that question. This was a sentiment expressed repeatedly by certain members of the sounding board that I was sort of driving this forward to a single conclusion. I don't think, in my own view, that is fair. What I was trying to do was give the members of the council, because after all, it is they who take the decision, not the sounding board, not the local community. It is you, the democratically elected representatives of the people of Ealing, who will have to make these difficult choices, and to give you a sense of the areas in which you need to exercise your democratic judgment as councillors. And as Councillor Manro set out, they are principally to do with how the project is funded and the extent of the housing and the both the profile of that housing, both in terms of social distribution, the way in which it fits in with the three strategic priorities which Councillor Mason and the governing party have set for this borough. And then secondly, to the use or non-use of metropolitan open land and the footprint across this rather wonderful site, and the way in which the fragrant River Brent can be cleaned up and enhanced, and the shopping trolleys removed, and it made part of a site which will have on one side of it high quality housing, and on the other side of it possibly a world-class leisure centre.
Thank you. Councillor Manro, the issues related to parking.
Well, as I've said, Chair, this is a really early stage. We haven't done all the design. We don't even know. There's two feasibility reports, one looking at 200, one looking at 300. It may be somewhere in between. So I really think this is a very early stage to be asking about detailed questions, such as, are you going to share parking or not? It really is not the time. There's time, all of that to happen as the planning process, works. It'll go through that planning process. And that's the time, I think, when we can take questions around the detailed design.
And I think it's fair to say that we would endeavour to have those conversations actually at the Community Sounding Board. We would want to engage the Community Sounding Board in precisely discussion about where that provision should be, what the quantum of that provision should be, what the needs and requirements of a leisure centre operator might be, what the needs and requirements of the planning application will be, and what the planning policy will be, precisely where it's oriented, how people will access it, where the vehicular entrance and exits will be located on the site plan. I would hope and anticipate that that's up for discussion in future iterations. Councillor Ball.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a question for Councillor Manro. Councillor Manro referred to working with residents and community groups in a new, open, transparent way at the start. In his sounding board report, Sir Sherrard raised concerns about the impact of any development on metropolitan open land, inclusive of ecological impact and development in the floodplain. In addition, as Councillor Manro said, the council did a survey of residents that found that less than a third of residents wanted enabling development to fund this. So in what way have the recommendations before Cabinet tonight taken account of these residents' views, which you solicited, and how does that demonstrate working with residents?
Councillor Manro.
Okay, look, these are difficult choices. The balance has to be struck between different options. I mean, if you read my inbox, we would get emails from people who actually want nothing built on that site. They'd rather we took away the building and we just turned it back into MOL, from other people saying a leisure centre is absolutely essential. Children in Ealing can't swim and they need that facility back, to others saying, as I've said, indicated in my report, that a balance has to be struck between some enabling development and the leisure centre. And as I indicated earlier, there's 3 members of this cabinet that were on the planning committee that refused the previous application. And that was because of the scale and massing. And we've taken that on board. We're looking at how we balance enabling development, which is not going to pay for that leisure centre, because we're really aware that it's MOL land and the scale of the development has to be in relation to where it sits. So that's why we have come up with this plan, but it is open for design studies still. It's still an early stage, 2 feasibility studies, and we'll work our way through that. And that's why we're listening to the residents. That's why we're saying it's a new way of working. We will have disagreements and we will work with the sounding board, we'll work with our residents, but we will be open and transparent. And where we disagree, we will disagree and we'll have to work our way through that. But we're the elected representatives of the borough and we need to make those decisions, but we'll do it in the open, working with our residents and interested groups who will all have different views. And that's the reality of it.
Thank you very much. So I now move to ask for contributions from Cabinet, if there are any. I see Councillor Donnelly. Go ahead, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Manro's mentioned me in dispatches a couple of times relating to the previous EcoWorld planning application, and it's absolutely true. I spoke at some length that evening about what I perceived to be the cumulative shortcomings of the plan that was in front of us, well-meaning as it undoubtedly was. Well, I didn't speak against the principle of a mixed development on the site. I guess one could say my indirect reward for my impulsiveness on the evening was a few months later, I found myself with the cabinet portfolio responsible for finding the money to deal with the aftermath of that refusal. But that's politics, I guess. What I can say from that perspective is that we pulled out all the stops, I think, to try to find the way to move this forward with the maximum effect and the minimum disruption at an affordable cost. Because we have these, it is a triangulation, what do the residents want? What do they not want? What can we as an authority afford to give them? And I think there are some set pieces here. We simply can't afford to build the kind of facility that residents not only deserve, but actually the only kind of facility worth building now on our own. That can't be done. I mean, let's get that out there now. So that's one of the points of triangulation. One of the shortcomings, I think, of the Eco World proposal and everything around it was I think it came to be seen by the public as a housing development with a leisure centre attached. Now, that's absolutely not the case this time around. Councillor Manro's made clear, he's referred to, and we are in feasibility stage, exploratory stage still, between 200 and 300 homes, way below what the previous one was. And I guess we're trying to calibrate this to say, what do we need? Balancing what we can responsibly borrow and invest alongside what we can take in by other means, such as enabling development. And that is the principle that we're applying this time. Of course, I mean, there are still issues to be seen, to be addressed, and we are not at the end of this journey. But I can tell you that this cabinet meets and discusses Gurnell as often as any other single issue during the nearly 2 years that I've sat in it. We've held it up to the light, we've turned it upside down, back to front, we've considered every possibility, and we have deployed, shall we say, the finest diplomatic mind in the borough to help us move this forward. And I think we all owe Sir Sherrod a vote of thanks for having taken on this challenge and managed it with characteristic skill. So from my point of view, do I feel that we are ready to proceed to the next step based upon the information in front of us? Absolutely, I do. Am I absolutely certain where we're going to end up? Well, I think, as Councillor Manro said, we're still in the stage of piecing together the options that are available, and this is certainly not the last time that this cabinet will discuss this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed, thank you very much. And Councillor Anand.
Thank you, Chair. I might be repeating some of the facilities which are going to be provided on the site, and Councillor Manro very eloquently pointed that out in his report. But I want to apologise for that, because I think this is the future of Gurnell, and we should celebrate if we are going to be delivering on this site with all the facilities. Chair, the indoor and outdoor sports facilities strategy for 2022 and 2031 was produced in line with Sports England guidance, and that supports the provision and scale of the new swimming pool facilities, which is proposed for the new leisure centre. And the new Gurnell swimming pool facility with increased water space will be Ealing's flagship facility and will be really critical to Ealing meeting future demand for water space for Ealing residents. Even with the new Gurnell facility, the borough will need more water space to meet the needs of its residents. There's going to be a movable floor and a boom capability will allow all types of activity to take place, from learning to swim for the youngest of children and school groups, to club swimming for all ages and abilities, and aqua aerobic classes, which is incredibly popular with the older adults. There will be a new for Ealing and with the latest design in leisure pools, which will provide much needed family water space, particularly for those families with children aged under 8. There'll also be a soft play area, and that will provide families with toddlers a place to enjoy together and to meet other young families. And that's really encouraging a healthy, active start in life. There'll be also a new improved gym and more studio spaces for group exercise classes. And that will provide for a lot of women who would feel that they would want just classes for women only and for young girls. But of course, men and boys won't be excluded, but with the opportunity to be active is the main reason behind these new facilities. There'll be new improved BMX track for young people and families of all ages and abilities, a new improved skate facility for all ages and abilities. These are new modern facilities that I've not seen before. So it'll be really interesting to see the BMX track and also the skate facilities. CAF, brilliant for social care for our people, a place together to work, enjoy as individuals and as family and group of friends who could actually go out and enjoy and be able to use health facilities within that one roof. As we can be seen from our experience of opening new facilities at Northolt Leisure Centre and everyone active in Acton Centre. So the new Gurnell facility will lead to an increase in the number of residents who will be using this facility to the appeal and attraction of the new, better quality facilities. Fit for purpose for now, in the future, as opposed to the old dated facilities, which are over 30 years old. So this is going to be a new fantastic facility for all our residents. And also it will be replacing the Vital of our Ealing Swimming Club to return to its previous provision and to start to grow even further. For many years, the club has provided thousands of Ealing youngsters of all abilities with the opportunity to swim for pleasure or compete at a level they aspire to. So I think this is a fantastic report, moving on to the future. And I think we should all be very proud of the great work of the sounding board and of all the council officers as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to look through my notes because I could really just repeat what I said last month. Because this is the second month in a row we are taking a difficult topic and finding a way forward to deliver a way to tackle the health inequalities of this borough. So I could repeat the statistics we heard last time, the kind of the 10 years lost of healthy life for a woman in Norwood Green compared to a woman in Northfield, and how this will contribute to that. But I do want to take a little step back and refer again to the sports facility strategy that Councillor Anand mentioned. Swim England's position on the reopening of Gurnell is not just that it is critical to provision in Ealing, but to Greater London, because it will be one of so few 50-metre pools that it is vitally important to the entire population of London. And if we look at the wider context, there are not many councils who are doing this. There are not many councils who are opening new facilities at this point. In 2021, Swim England released a report called A Decade in Decline, which will suggest to you the state of Tory government for the last 10 years and what it has done to leisure facilities and swimming facilities in particular. And this morning, in fact, Swim England and a number of other organisations wrote again to the government to demand action on funding, because as we've heard, kind of the impact of COVID and energy costs is closing so many more pools and other leisure facilities because government are disgracefully stopping their support for those facilities in terms of the energy costs that are ongoing at the moment. Those reports by Swim England haven't resulted in massive action from the government. The government not bringing forward huge capital programmes to fund this. So it is up to us to find a way forward. And I think Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Manro and others have done a great work in the last kind of 2 years of this administration to look for a way forward that reopens a vital pool and do so with enabling development of the least possible impact. And not to rehearse the arguments that we heard nearly 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago, I think now, that Councillor Donnelly and I made at that committee about the impact of that proposal. But this is not it. And I'm so pleased that Councillor Manro has found a way to bring down the size, bring down the impact, and find a way forward that kind of meets the needs of the residents and finds a way for us to pay for it. And it is something that not many councils are doing. And I think all those involved should be congratulated. And I look forward to seeing it built and seeing you, Councillor Mason, taking the first dive off the diving board.
Yeah, which I understand, given the Acton, Northolt and various other leisure centres, has been a tradition of the leader of the council. Both Councillors Bell and Cudmore have been paparazzied in their Speedos. I'm not intending for that to be the case for Gurnell. We're just checking, aren't we? Whilst that might have been a bit of levity, I'll just say to Councillor Gallant and I'll just say to Councillor Ball, like, it's probably not wise when we're discussing issues relating to the stark health inequalities between people living in Southall and people living in Ealing that you snigger and chunter from your positions. They are serious issues to which have been made light of in the last 24 hours. And I think that's highly inappropriate. Councillor Raza.
Sorry, can I have a point of personal explanation if it counts in here? I mean, the sniggering was about Councillor Blacker mentioning Norwood Green, which is nowhere near Gurnell. So he's just recycling the argument from.
Well, I'm glad you acknowledged that you were sniggering at health inequalities. The provision of sports across this borough in a flagship facility like Gurnell, of course, will have a major impact across the entirety of the borough. And I think that's effectively what the report's suggesting.
Chair,
Councillor Gallant, do you want to issue an offer of personal explanation?
Well, we had absolutely no intention of sniggering at anybody at hardship at all. We were only we were making a comment on a verbal aspect of what Councillor Blacker was saying. We had no intention of making any sniggering at all at anybody's hardship. I can assure you that.
Well, I'm glad that's been clarified. Councillor Raza.
So yes, one of the major priorities of this administration is to tackle inequalities. And this is a perfect example of how we're being ambitious about doing it. We've heard from Councillor Munro a really quite a difficult conundrum in front of us. We've thrashed out several times over, and actually what's come out tonight more than ever is that it's a balance, and it's a partnership between our residents, between our community groups and ourselves, in order to make sure that our residents get the best possible deal, and to make sure that we can make this a facility that will be future-proofed for generations and close that inequalities gap. Councillor Anand pretty much laid out what I was going to say about what the facilities would mean to communities, and particularly in this area where it's been lacking for some time, and somewhere where it's really badly needed. So I think that this is a work in progress, and we will be working forwards in this feasibility that we've been discussing. It's not a sort of work done sort of report that has come out at the moment, as some of the questions have alluded to, that we were going to sort of suddenly have something very concrete in front of you today. This is a discussion, and this is the way forward to work together. And I think that the sounding board has been doing some excellent work in making sure that everybody's voice is heard here, and we will deliver something that will be truly something we can be proud of. And I look forward to our leader diving off in his Speedos.
And I clarify for the record, that's definitely not going to happen. Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. So I think, I've been really proud that we've been a borough that has had a 50-metre swimming pool at Gurnell, and I've certainly had many happy memories there myself with my children, where they've learned, had lots of fun. They've, been teaching them to swim. And of course, it's not just me who've benefited from that. Gurnell has hosted many families, adults, children, people with all range of abilities. And it's also hosted, of course, the biggest swim club in the country. Let's not forget, it was host to the biggest swim club in the country, host to a boccia club. Any of you if you know what boccia is, but we're keen to make sure that we're catering for that going forward as well. And of course, a lot of competitive training and galas there as well, with athletes using it to train as well. We've heard, of course, tonight the importance of swimming, not only on tackling health inequalities, but just even the endorphins that you get from the pleasure of swimming with those that you either on your own or with those that you love. And of course, it is, and I don't think anybody's mentioned yet, but a critical life skill that is taught to our children. In addition to that, of course, a number of people have mentioned it isn't just the leisure facility indoors, but it's also the leisure facilities that are outdoors. And again, with family members have benefited from the BMX track that's there, the skate park that's there. And it's really key that we replace these. But anybody who's been there before will have known all too well there was a significant need to replace the facility. And it was a need for a full scale replacement of that facility. The brutalist design of the building was not only dilapidated, but nowhere near fit for purpose to just attempt to refurbish it. So it has been our duty as a council and a cabinet to deliver a fit for purpose swimming pool and leisure facility as quickly as possible. But it has also been our duty to do so through proper engagement. And that is exactly what has happened over the last few months, and to do so at the highest level and to make sure that we have listened. And what I can see here tonight is that all of those voices have been listened, and there has been compromise about what has been brought forward. And we have shown that we're a listening council that is working honestly, open, transparently to make sure that we bring forward the best proposals. And that's why we need to take this critical step forward to knock down what is now a dangerous building and to be able to move forward with what this borough deserves with a new Gurnell.
Thank you very much. Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Manro, for introducing the report. I want to just particularly focus on two aspects of the report that are of interest to me from my perspective as Cabinet Member for Climate Action. And that is in relation to the reuse appraisal and also the Metropolitan Open Land. I very much appreciate the depth of analysis that has gone into looking at whether or not we could reuse this building. I don't think that we have ever done anything to this degree previously when looking at any of our buildings as to whether it could be reused, and the detail that this goes into on the carbon impact, both of the existing building and of any future replacement. In particular, we have taken into account as well embodied carbon, which I think is really important, and that's a step forward for us in our understanding of carbon. I don't think we've done that before at all. So I really, really welcome that. I think it's a great step forward, and an example, I think, for the future for us as a council as we look at these kind of issues. I hope people have had a chance to look in detail at the reuse analysis. It does really show in graphic detail that the current building has got a massive carbon footprint in terms of its operational usage. Most of that comes from the gas that is used in the building, over 1,000 tons of carbon per annum from that gas usage. And the reuse analysis makes really clear that all of the different ways that we could approach that, some degree of retrofitting or very deep retrofitting, none of them would have the impact that we would have with knocking down the building and starting again. Even in terms of the embodied carbon, there's a very helpful 15-year analysis on the carbon impact, and it does show that actually replacing the building is the right thing to do in relation to the carbon, even taking into account that embodied carbon. So I think that's really welcome, and it's great to have it set out so openly and transparently, as you said, Councillor Manro, so that everyone is able to see that for themselves. And I think, you know, that is clearly why that openness and transparency is why the sounding board have agreed on this, and that, you know, certainly reuse is not an option, you know, and also, of course, the cost that the deep retrofit that would be required would amount to is actually quite massive. It's a similar price to a new build. And of course, a new build offers us great opportunities in terms of achieving passive house standards, and making sure that we have minimal carbon impact. And we've got a real opportunity, I think, here to create a leisure centre, which is an exemplar of sustainability. And that's what is on the table tonight, really, agreeing that we can have that in our borough. So the other area that I just wanted to briefly touch on was Metropolitan Open Land. Obviously, this is a Metropolitan Open Land, but we've already got buildings on it. We've already got a leisure centre on it, and we've got other, ancillary, car parking, etc., on the site. Clearly, the previous Eco World proposal that has been mentioned would have had a significant impact on that Metropolitan Open Land. So I'm really delighted that Councillor Manro has been able to find an option that we can take forward that has a minimal impact on the Metropolitan Open Land compared to what we were previously looking at, and particularly now looking at using the car park, and minimizing that impact. But on top of that, I think, and this is something that the chair of the sounding board mentioned, there is also the opportunity to make the Metropolitan Open Land more accessible and to animate it so that it's actually used more by local people, and that it can have an impact on people's well-being in the area, rather than to some extent, being an area of kind of land that's not really used to the potential that it could be used to. So those are the two that I just wanted to cover. And I think just finally, to really thank the sounding board and the chair of the sounding board. I think that your remarks at the beginning were, thoughtful, considered, and pragmatic. And I think, those are things that, we all need to have in our lives. And, it was really great to understand the discussions that the sounding board went through, and all of the things that you took into account, but also, the process by which you came to your kind of overall take on this, bearing in mind, as you say, the need to balance the different priorities and the different needs of all sections of the community. So thank you for the work that you did on that. And thank you to Councillor Manro for this report, which I'm very happy to support tonight.
Thank you very much. And in conclusion, let me just add a few remarks. Look, this is going to be an incredible opportunity for us to bring about a state-of-the-art, sustainable £45 million investment in a new Olympic-sized swimming pool and a leisure centre to replace Gurnell. And that's great news for swimmers. It's great news for our residents. It's great news for our young people who knows might be the Olympians of tomorrow. The current facilities are a mess. They are poorly designed, badly built. They are dilapidated. They are past their usable lifespan. They are energy guzzling. They are fueled by gas boilers and small by today's standards. Where you mix chlorine, steel, water, and concrete, who'd expect that it would last as long as it has done? Attempts to try and fix this were equally as a mess. 17 stories with tower blocks attached to the leisure centre that invariably in 40 years' time would have had to come down, displacing so many residents and embodying huge quantums of carbon. And because of the huge impact that they would have had, it was right that the planning committee at the time, and indeed the Mayor of London, decided not to support that proposal. Since we took over in May 21, we've been piloting a very new and different approach to bringing Gurnell back into use in a much better way. We launched the Community Sounding Board. which I think Sir Sherrod has done incredible work to do precisely what we asked it to do, which was to have an open conversation about the challenges that we knew the project faced, to be transparent about the costs and the implications and the compromises that would need to be made in order to move it forward, and to be inclusive in the way that it has had those conversations. And you only need to look, I think, actually in the report at the exercises that were done with the sounding board to vision what a new purpose-built facility might look like. That is a testament to the way that we're going to move forward as an administration overall. Of course, we support that by the listening exercises that we do that really demonstrate the insight that we know residents have. When you ask residents sensible questions, they come up with sensible answers. So it's clear that they know that we also have those challenges to face. And when asked, how do we deliver this new state-of-the-art facility, they said a mixed-use development. I'd say to the opposition, just a few months ago, you were advocating that we reopen the facility as it is, substandard in terms of the facility mix that it would offer, costly in terms of our ability to deliver, a position which is now not supported by the universal position of all those involved in the Gurnell Sounding Board. Every single group has consented and agrees to the principle that the costly, gas-guzzling, energy inefficient building must go, and it should be replaced by an alternative. And we are prudent and we are careful in our approach. We know what it's going to cost us. We know that that is a price worth paying, but what we will not do is jeopardize the finances of this authority by spending money beyond our means. That is why we are going to need to look at a mixed-use development that does the bare minimum to be able to support the development to go ahead. That is something between 200 and 300 homes, less than 10 stories, the market minimum. And of course, we're going to do that by delivering high levels of genuinely affordable homes too. Quite frankly, this is a great deal for the residents of the borough, and it just goes to show what you can achieve on an old bit of sewage works and a tip. It's going to be a good project. It's going to be positive. And as we've already discussed, it's our absolute priority to make sure that we get that building open in hopefully 3 years' time. So I'd like to concur with Councillor Donnelly when we offer our vote of thanks to Sir Sherrod Cowper-Coles for taking the sounding board through that difficult journey, but one that we hopefully gets to an outcome of today. I thank Councillor Manro and the officers who've worked so hard to get us to this position. We get some of this is going to be popular. We get that some of this is going to be unpopular. But when we need to balance public need, public opinion, and public finances, I think this is a great outcome for the people of this borough. So I direct Cabinet members to the recommendations in the report and ask that they are agreed. Agreed. Thank you. And thank you very much to our external speakers. Whilst we just do a little bit of readjusting, I believe Councillor Ball is being substituted for Councillor. Right, let's go to the next one. Budget update 2022-2023, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. One of those meetings where, unfortunately, you get to hear a lot of me from this point on. In terms of the Q3 budget update, reflects that we've continued to face the consequences of high inflation, cost of living, and the general turmoil in the economy, to which I'll make greater reference when I introduce the paper on next year's budget. I think members will note that there's relatively little change from the Q2 position, a slight improvement in the deficit. But again, linking through to the next paper, this shows you, in effect, the impact of inflation during this year, particularly in adult social care and children's services. And as I'll sketch out briefly in a trailer for the next item, what we sought to do in building next year's budget is to kind of retrofit, to use a term from the previous discussion, to retrofit for this year's inflation in next year's budget. But happy to answer any questions from colleagues.
And I don't believe there are any requests to ask a question from the opposition on this. I'm looking to my cabinet colleagues. I don't believe that there are. So I'll direct you to the recommendations in the report and ask if they're agreed.
Agreed.
We then move to the 2023-24 budget strategy and MTFS. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. To use the opening line of the purpose of the report, in times of unprecedented political turmoil and economic uncertainty, the Council has acted decisively to invest in the delivery of key services to residents in the year ahead, while ensuring a balanced budget and a more secure financial footing for future years. That's the aspiration I put in front of you. I've made reference already in the previous item to the impact of inflation and the cost of living. We know that priority of this administration is to protect the vulnerable and those with the least ability to survive in the turmoil of the economic madness that we've seen this year or this financial year. 3 prime ministers, one of whom the shortest reigning in our history, but in the 40 whatever days, voluntarily set fire to the British economy. I thank officers. I will do so more formally when it comes to the council debate for having worked so hard to put together what I think is a very well shaped and well presented in all senses set of proposals on our behalf. And I think it's been an extraordinary year. At various times, I've been very, very concerned about what sort of paper I was going to be presenting at this meeting and the other meetings in this cycle. It certainly seemed in September that we would be looking at almost an emergency situation with wholesale cuts reflecting the crazy impact on the markets. Now, fortunately, that situation has improved, and we're in a position to, in effect, just about deal with the inflation that's happened and to make some provision for the inflation that we expect in the year ahead. So as I and officers presented to overview and scrutiny yesterday evening, if you look at the pie chart of where the investment comes this time round, it's almost all from inflation and growth, and even of the growth, some of that really is retrospective inflation. So I'm pleased with the proposals that we've been able to bring forward. I think full council is the proper place for debate on these, and obviously colleagues have had significant involvement in pulling together the proposals that are in front of you. They're not a surprise to you before they come here. I'm very happy to take any questions that may arise.
Well, it is good that you are happy to take questions, because I know that there is one from Councillor Gallant.
I hope you'll be pleased about this one. Thank you, Chair. Actually, I've just got two brief questions. Just referring to clause 19.1, that's page 96 of the pack and 54 of the report, property and assets. So I mean, I understand what you're saying in there and appreciate what you're saying in there. I just want to ask about the exploitation, our commercial exploitation of those assets that the council has, like the council's film sets, the parks, facilities and so on. Are we exploiting them enough? And the cross-borough services like waste disposal, in your view, are we making the fullest potential out of that? Second question is about borrowings, which was discussed last night. It's good news that the council is actually benefiting from a very low rate of interest at the moment, which was fixed. When it eventually has to start negotiating other rates, is there a strategy in place for when we get to that time?
Councillor Donnelly, you go ahead. I might want to come in on that second question too.
Okay, clearly the last few years have seen enormous turmoil in terms of the ability to generate income from anything. People haven't been able to go to places. Gannell, we talked about Gannell before. I mean, Gannell shut its doors not because of its decrepitude, but because of COVID, and hasn't reopened. Do I think we can do better? I'm sure we can. Do we reset and rethink as we return to what we hope will be normality? I'm sure we will. Will all of us, will all of our officer team be looking to get a better outcome? Well, I'm sure we will. But I think as far as the borrowing strategy is concerned, I don't think we're expecting anything dramatic to happen. In fact, if anything, medium-term rates will probably fall. So, as I've said at this meeting before, the purpose of the money that we originally borrowed was to invest in capital programs. Those capital programs, for various reasons, haven't come forward as quickly as they were meant to. In the meantime, we've invested the money at a higher rate of interest, much higher rate of interest than we were paying out. As I said at overview and scrutiny yesterday evening, it's not, we're not a bank, and we will return to more business as usual as we invest the funds in the projects that they were intended for. I mean, on that point, I should report for minutes, sorry, apologies, Chair, that we presented to overview and scrutiny and to the Ealing Business Partnership, neither of whom had comments to make, or shall we say, negative or detrimental comments to make about the proposal. So we fulfilled our statutory obligations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. You know, perhaps we'll discuss it more in the sort of the budget meeting, but I think it should be said here that on our return from temporary borrowing, the reason that we're enjoying such a beneficial situation on the cash that we're holding at hand and in bank for the purposes of investing in our capital programme is the interest rates have gone through the roof. Interest rates wouldn't have gone through the roof had it not been for Kwesi Kwarteng and Liz Truss's mini budget that brought the pension market to its knees, that required £65 billion worth of investment by the Bank of England and the government to prevent every pensioner's pension in this country hanging on the precipice of going under. We benefit in both the budget outrun and in our MTFS from that, but purely on the basis of interest rates being where they are. We're in this perverse and abstract situation of not wanting that to have been the case. If it were not, inflation wouldn't currently be putting us in a situation of needing to invest quite sums of money that we have done. I do have to say, that being said, the budget, of course, is helping us do all the things that we said that we would do in terms of economic justice and prudence in a very difficult time, ensuring that we are prepared for whatever might come next. Are there any other points or questions that Cabinet would like to make? If not, I'm going to direct you to the recommendations in the report and ask if they are agreed.
Agreed.
Additional council tax support 22, 23, 24. Councillor Donnelly.
Me again, Chair. As has become standard, we have to respond in short order to announcements that the government makes about funding. Funding in itself obviously is welcome. It's obviously would be nicer to live in a world where we had a better longer term understanding of what money was coming in our direction. As it stands, a distribution is required of additional council tax support funding for 23-24. An announcement was made only in well, in fact, 2 days before Christmas. So the proposal that's laid out in front of you this evening is to distribute for those who are eligible on the 1st of April, a £40 up to £40 reduction. And insofar as we have money left after we have distributed that it should go to top up our discretionary fund, which will apply to those people who, if you move into the borough on the 2nd of April, you're not eligible. So obviously those people are no less in need. So there is definitely a growing demand for our discretionary support services, and we would look to boost those in the distribution of this money.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, I've got 3 questions for the portfolio holder. The first one is, does the portfolio holder think that this is a relatively small amount of money compared to what families in Ealing need, given some of the comments that the leader has just made about the government and the Prime Minister previously? Secondly, are you aware of any future schemes like this that might materialise in the next 3 to 6 months from the government to help anyone else in Ealing later? And then lastly, of the 9,926 households referred to in the report, how many households do you think will need to apply for the discretionary element of this payment?
Okay, taking these in order. Yes, it's relatively small here, and I don't think anybody would dispute that, but we here run the most generous council tax support scheme of our own that you'll find pretty much anywhere, and this is as it says, additional. It supplements what we do already, and as you know, this cabinet agreed improvements to that fund only a month or 2 ago. Future schemes, the government doesn't take me into its confidence on many things. We only today, we had information come out about the housing support grant. Yeah, house support fund. So that's another sort of £5 or £6 million arrives out of a clear blue sky, which we have to almost at no notice found ways of distributing. So as again, it'd be really good to know in advance so that we could make proper plans. And as of course, as far as the liability goes, we don't give people money, it's money off their council tax. So they need to owe council tax in order to get the money. On the 9,926, I don't know. I'm not really inclined to give an exact figure and response, but that is the estimate that we make. So I'm not sure. I don't think I understand his question, if I'm fair.
No, that's fine. I look to members of the cabinet to see if there are any other contributions. Yeah, Councillor Mahfouz, yeah.
Yeah, I think absolutely, what Councillor Donnelly said there, just to reiterate that this is just a small drop in the ocean. Actually, we already have, as a local authority, one of the most generous, progressive council tax support schemes in the country, which is helping people day in, day out with some of the real cost of living challenges that they have on a day-to-day basis. None more so now because of the incompetence that has been created by this government over the past few months, which has just been not just incompetent, but absolutely criminal, quite frankly. This contribution won't make much of an impact, but
Order, Chair.
No, sorry. Well,
criminal is not a word I condone.
Sorry, there's no points of order in a cabinet meeting, so just don't interrupt. So go ahead, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. So absolutely, look, the families that will be receiving, the households that will be receiving this contribution will obviously welcome it, but actually reality is that their costs have gone up, been driven up both in the supermarket when they go in, week out to buy their staples, and the utility costs that they're having to pay for, which are far outweigh this contribution. And in terms of perhaps their rents that have gone up in order to pay for their landlords' mortgages as well. So all of these costs have gone up far more than what the government is contributing in this small way. And we are leading the way in terms of making sure that we are progressive, we are generous in terms of our support to tackle this cost of living crisis.
Thank you very much. The current Prime Minister and the Prime Minister that won are the first in the history of Britain to have received fixed penalty notices. So, let's spend less time chuntering about criminals and more time focusing on supporting the most vulnerable in our borough to be able to put food on the table. I direct Cabinet members to the recommendations in the report and ask that they are agreed. Okay, and the next agenda item is the community school admissions arrangement for 2024-2025 in Councillor Nagpal's absence. Whilst other parts of London are experiencing significant pressure in the downward trajectory of the number of school children entering early key stages, in Ealing our arrangements for the forthcoming year are that we are staying steady. The arrangements in the report are taken each and every year to set out what the process and what the admissions criteria and what the numbers will be for each of our maintained schools. The only material change this year is the already understood and planned reduction in Oldfield Primary by 15 places. In all other circumstances, is business as usual in Ealing schools. So unless there are any questions or comments that people would like to make, direct you to the recommendations in the report and ask that they're agreed. Agreed. Thank you very much. We now move on to housing delivery update, Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. It's a good report, good progress. This report seeks permission to let contracts on 3 schemes through the HRA, Lexton and Stein Road, the former Northolt Grange Community Centre and Sussex Crescent. And also there's a number of other asks in terms of update on golf links, etc. But this is a key part of our mission to deliver 4,000 genuinely affordable homes. So these 3 schemes will deliver 306 homes. 181 council homes will be delivered. 71 of those will be for our older residents, specialist housing. 117 will be shared ownership. And we will get into the borough £9.82 million of grant to help us deliver these 306 homes. And this is at the cutting edge. We will be placing contracts for people to build these homes, and they will be on the ground ASAP as the contracts are let, and these homes will be delivered. 181 council housing waiting list residents will be allocated those homes as they're built. There'll be shared ownership homes for some of our intermediate residents who can afford some money, but can afford a shared ownership property. And our elderly residents will have access to specialist housing. This is a good news story, and we are on our way to start and deliver the 4,000 genuinely affordable homes by the end of this term. So it's a good news story, and we should be proud of our officers who work hard to make sure that we can lever in grant from the GLA and deliver these homes ongoing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Manro. Are there any other points or questions? If there are not, I'll direct you to the recommendations in the report and ask that they're agreed. Property insurance procurement, Councillor Donnelly, the highlight of the evening.
Yeah, thank you. I've tried very hard to think of a jazzed up introduction to a report on having legally required property insurance. So I'd ask Cabinet's approval that we tender to go and get some. Otherwise, we'll be in terrible trouble.
Would the Cabinet like to agree to be in full compliance with the law?
Great.
Thank you very much. We now move on to we don't move on to the replacement of Gurnell Leisure Centre because we've already agreed that, but we do move on to the sale of minority shareholding in the BSF project company. I believe that's Councillor Donnelly again.
Me again, Chair. Yeah, this it's a piece of tidying up from a long-standing contract. The council is, as the report says, a minority shareholder in a PFI arrangement relating to Dormerswell School. Majority shareholder is offered to buy out our share. There are no evident tangible benefits to us in retaining the shareholding as things stand. As required, we had independent financial advice about the situation and the fairness or otherwise of the offer that had been made to us. The advice is that we've received a fair offer, and the proposal I put to Cabinet this evening is that we accept that offer.
So I don't see any indications. So I direct the recommendations in the report and ask that they're agreed. Item 15, special educational needs, statutory capital approvals at Mandeville, statutory and capital proposals at John Chilton contract award. We made a commitment to ensure that we provide the places that we need within our schools for children with special educational needs. This represents the latest iteration of those proposals, both at Oldfield Primary School, which would proceed with an expansion of the Mandeville Special School, as well as capital approvals at John Chilton. They represent good value, and they represent precisely what we need, is to expand the provision for a growing number of young people who need that little bit extra support to achieve all of their ambitions and their abilities at school. So I don't believe I have got any indications. So I'll direct you to the recommendations in the report and ask that they're agreed. Item number 16, the Violence Against Women and Girls Strategy, Councillor Raza.
Thank you, Chair. So following the Safe Reeling Women's Listening Exercise, an action plan that we published in September, this strategy sort of renews the council's commitment to stopping male violence against women and girls. And the strategy sort of builds on this already improved street lighting and CCTV education programme, and takes the initiatives sort of that step further. And we seek to address more of the misogynistic behaviour and introduce new ways to tackle domestic violence, aiming to sort of further change attitudes and culture in communities that can lead to more misogyny and violence towards women and girls. So we have some clear priorities of prevention, strong support for women and girls, developing coordinated responses, and holding perpetrators to account. This strategy is where everyone is responsible for this change. And while it will support women and girls' needs, it will also challenge that unacceptable behaviour and hold perpetrators to account. This is a real comprehensive piece of work, and I'd like to thank all of the officers who've worked very hard in putting this together. Thank you.
Okay, are there any indications for Cabinet to speak or ask any questions? There are none. Again, I'd echo my thanks for the officers on this particular piece of work. It is incumbent upon everybody, and I'd say particularly men, to deal with issues of toxic masculinity, and of course, the predominant driver of violence against women and girls, and that's men. And hopefully what the strategy will do, both in terms of the investments that it's making in expanded support for our organisations that deal with domestic violence, but also hopefully some very innovative work that's going to look at domestic violence in our council estates and amongst our tenants, that we really can start to arrest what is a growing trend, that unfortunately still does not have the levels of conviction that are required, and the levels of recidivism amongst perpetrators that unfortunately go unchallenged by a probation service that unfortunately, as I think the National Prison Inspectorate could demonstrate, significantly lost its way. So with that in mind, and with your indulgence for adding my thoughts, I direct Cabinet members to the recommendations in the report and ask that they're agreed. Thank you very much. That concludes today's meeting. The date of the next meeting of the Cabinet will be on the 29th of March, and we will see you then. Thank you very much.